The Sarentu Way by bluetheseraph. Chapter 4. Shoot. Forget the cow! Shoot her! I heard the soldier yell as I sprinted and rolled back into the brush just before another round of bullets were fired at my back. She's got tap clothes on. It's one of the escapees. Hey, Blue, get back here. Damn this shirt. Damn these pants. I might as well have left Tap with a giant sign on my back that said shoot me. Quickly, my fingers fumbled behind my back into Solek's quiver as I tried to grab another arrow. I couldn't let them leave this place alive, and I certainly couldn't let them kill me. It was their life or mine. That realization hit me quick. I had to kill them. I had never killed anything before, not even the bugs that very rarely made their way inside the tap facility. The very idea made me queasy. Taking another life, even in a do or die situation like this, the realization that if I didn't shoot to kill, I would end up dead. None of that provided any comfort or assurance of what I should do, what I knew I needed to do if I wanted to see my family again. Another round of bullets, fired quickly through the bushes, snapped me out of my dreading head, all of them just barely missing my face. Do you see her? A soldier's yell hit my ears before I could process what I was going to do next, until it seemed my instincts made the choice for me. In an instant, it was like my brain shut down and my body reacted near instinctively. I could feel the weight of the arrow in my fingers as I steeled myself and drew it back in the bowstring, aiming where my ears had picked up the sound of his voice, his grating, agitating voice. I drew it back on the string, unthinking, unfeeling. It scared me for only a brief second until any further semblance of emotions, regret, fear, hesitance, seemed to evaporate off my shoulders. And before I could bounce back, I let out a cry full of a rage I didn't know I'd carried and let the arrow fly, whizzing out from the bow through the ferns. I lost sight of it when it zipped away, but its release was quickly followed with the guttural sound of a human crying out in pain. It was as quick as a pin being dropped. There 1 second, and silent quicker than it fell. A thump on the ground reached my ears. I didn't look. I couldn't. Not yet. There was one more soldier. My arm reached back again, repeating the same motion. Grab, load, draw, locate, release. A few bullets fired off up into the air, scaring away some flying animals that had likely been resting in the trees above before I heard another thud in the clearing. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears. My body felt hot. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, making me shudder and my tail stand on end before it curled and swished against the foliage. In an instant, I could hear nothing. Silence. Cautiously, I lifted my head out of the tops of the foliage, feeling my thoughts come back like I'd been snapped out of a daze I hadn't realized I slipped into. Everything felt surreal as I peered out ahead of me, standing over the fur now as they came up to about the height of my ribs. One soldier closest to the tree line, on his back, an arrow right through his torso, piercing him where his lung lay beneath his skin and bones. The other, further away by maybe 2 yards. I couldn't make out the arrow's position well, but it seemed it had pierced through his head, right between his eyes. My gut twisted as I looked at the scene that laid before me. I took a slow step out from the foliage, my shaking left hand still holding the bow grip. My vision blurred with hot tears. What had I done? I just killed 2 humans. I was a murderer. I was no better than Mercer. A deep bellow of pain broke me from my thoughts, my head snapping up to see the hammerhead cow trying and failing to stand on her wounded leg. She fell with a reverberating thump on the ground, shaking the earth below my feet. Calm, I cried out gently in Navi, one of the only words I remembered now from our mother tongue, before I began to move towards her. I didn't even realize I had discarded Solek's bow until I lifted my hand to the cow, palms facing her. It's okay. Let me help. The cow narrowed her eyes at me and in a blazing fury let out another bellow, warning me to back off. She must have thought I was going to hurt her. Her herd would be on us any second now, and I needed to make sure she wasn't going to die. Her gaze locked with mine. I could almost perfectly see how she felt, truly, at least despite the clear anger in her calls. She was afraid. Afraid for herself or afraid for her calf, I couldn't say, but I knew at that moment I couldn't leave her here alone. I couldn't just run off and abandon her when she was wounded, with no guarantee she'd be able to move. That poor calf needed its mother, needed its family, and she needed them too. Calm, I repeated again, slower this time. My bare feet moved slowly one after another to bring me closer to her, and my right hand lowered to take out the Depafet pod I had tucked away for myself. The mother eyed me suspiciously before seeing the pod I held in my hand, laying in my open palm. She must have known what it was, because her bellowing stopped and she began to lie still, staring into my eyes from where she laid. My heart was racing as I moved ever closer to her until I placed my free hand on her leg, under her bleeding wound. "It's all right. I won't hurt you," I spoke, even and calm. I hoped my eyes conveyed what my words couldn't. Her gaze was locked with mine. I felt minuscule compared to her, and it struck me to my core how tiny I really was in comparison. I'd always been the largest species around humans, me and the others, but out here on Pandora, I was the small one to everything else around me, from the flora to the fauna. But all the same, despite the fear of being so close to an animal who could easily trample me if she wanted, I couldn't help but smile. She was letting me get close to her, and she was beautiful, so incredibly beautiful. How could they have ever told us? No, how could I ever have believed for an instant, even for a fleeting moment of my life, that Pandora, my true home, was anything less than just that, beautiful? Gently, I extended my hand to offer out the Depafet pot, flat in my palm so, in case she did take it, I wouldn't run the risk of my fingers getting munched off. That would be a wound a quick wrap from Solek wouldn't fix. Her large eyes turned down to the pot in my palm as if inspecting whether or not eating it for me would bring her further pain. She was wary. But by some true miracle, she sniffed the pod, her breath tickling my hand, just before her tongue rolled out of her mouth to scoop it up to munch on it slowly, the outer skin bursting and whatever water-based inside contained in the plant dribbling down from one corner of her mouth mixed with her saliva. A soft, incredulous chuckle left me as I watched her. Truly, however could I have believed Pandora was as horrible a place as Mercer claimed, when moments like this could exist in this world? A low purring sound reverberated in her throat before I felt her nose press against my palm, turning my hand around so my hand laid flat against her skin. I didn't need to be a psych to realize this was her own way of thanking me, of letting me know she was grateful for my help. Another laugh left me, this time with tears welling in my eyes, before the cow carefully rose to her 6 feet. Her bleeding leg still looked raw, but she was at least able to put weight on it a little more comfortably. I felt a little gasp escape me when I felt her long neural cue brush against my fingers as she tilted her heavy head just a little bit to the side. All I could do was stand there frozen in pure awed bliss. With slow, thumping steps, she began to walk away from me with a steady limp in her gait, just as the rest of her herd appeared from the forest. The little calf who'd run off when the shots began to fire ran out from behind a large bull and cantered to their mother to greet her with a tender touch of their noses. My heart swelled in my chest before I carefully backed behind a large boulder sitting just beside me in the clearing by the bank. A tender reunion. I could have sworn I could almost see the mother hammerhead smile as she gave her baby a tender lick on the face, before she greeted her hearth with a raise of her head followed by the shimmying display of her skin fan. Something the elder members of the herd all returned, clearly happy to see their family member alive and well and reunited with their young. And just like that, they all turned to walk back down the shoreline, leaving behind the massacred sky people lying lifelessly on the bloodied patches of lush green grass. I couldn't fight the tears that welled up again in my eyes just watching them all go, the calf sticking close to its mother to tenderly brush against the side of her belly. It was so incredible. Breathtaking, I think would be the only word to adequately describe it. And even so, in my speechless state, I couldn't help being moved to tears streaming down my cheeks. The dead soldiers around me caught my eye, most killed by the hammerhead mother, but three stuck out individually with arrows I'd fired lodged in their bodies. And a realization came to me, making my body light. I wasn't anything like Mercer. I didn't kill to hurt anyone. I didn't kill them to cause harm to my planet or people. I killed them so these beautiful, peaceful creatures could live. So the mother could go on with her life and heal from this battle, living to fight another day for what she felt was important her own family, her herd, her baby. The weight of the deaths I'd caused didn't lighten. The knowledge I'd killed another living thing, sky person or otherwise, still felt heavy on my shoulders. But the self clarity of why I'd done it as I watched the herd of hammerheads walking away to continue their lives here on Pandora brought me a little bit of peace. Maybe that made me a bad person for justifying my acts of what I could essentially chalk up to murder, but I'd like to think that this at least was more of the right thing than the wrong, at least in this instance. And as I watched the herd vanish into the trees with teary eyes, I found myself suddenly missing my own family. My family? Wait a second. Solek, the Depafet. Right. Shit, I needed to move. You got distracted again, Ika'ri, I thought to myself. Rushing from behind a rock, I ran back to pick up the bow where I dropped it onto the ground in order to sling it over my back, before pivoting in my step to race back towards the dilapidated fueling station. Thankfully, there were no soldiers when I arrived, and Solek was still up against the tree where I'd left him, holding his shoulder with his eyes closed. Solek! I cried, sliding down onto my knees, causing a few arrows to be jostled around in the quiver on my back, one nearly falling out onto my shoulder. I'm so sorry it took so long, but I got the Depafet, and you'll never believe what just happened by the shore. He seemed surprised to hear my eager tone and the sight of the fresh tear stains on my face, his brow line raising as his eyes widened. But I could see he wasn't displeased by my enthusiasm in the slightest. I look forward to hearing you tell me all about it once we make our way to the resistance base, he said with a small laugh in his voice, and get ourselves cleaned up and fed. I'm certain you're famished and exhausted, Ika'ri. I blinked a few times. Right, the resistance. That's where he'd mentioned we'd be heading. I couldn't lie and say I wasn't both equal parts anxious and thrilled to be leaving to somewhere I'd at least be safe as I could from the RDA. Nothing would please me more than getting away from Tab as quickly as I could. And by the sound of my suddenly rumbling stomach, it seemed some food wouldn't hurt either. And what was more, the others were likely there already. I was going to have my own reunion with my family, just like the Hammerheads had. I was already looking forward to it. I was snapped from my thoughts when Solak cleared his throat. Are you going to hold the pot hostage for me, Sarentu? He asked, a teasing edge to his voice, noticing I'd spaced out. I let out a little yelp as I muttered, Right, the Depafet, sorry, and carefully removed a single pot from my pocket to offer to him. He took it gently, his rough fingers brushing against my palm. Watch, Sarentu, he spoke calmly as his eyes found mine. This is how we heal ourselves. He carefully lifted the Depafet pot to his lips and took a sighing bite from it, the inside fluid bursting on his lips and dribbling down his chin. It reminded me of how Talon used to eat when we were young, always making a mess on his mouth and chin that Alma would have to gently scold him about before giving him a napkin to clean his face. Solek carefully sighed before reaching his arm back to his shoulder and forced it back with a distinct pop, a cry escaping his mouth. Whether it was out of pain or relief was hard to tell. Carefully he regained his breath before rolling his shoulders to seemingly test his joints before he pushed off the ground and rose to his feet. Then his brace-clad hand extended down to me, inviting me to take it to help me stand, which I accepted with a small, thankful smile. Glad to see you're feeling better. The depth of it really works, I said, tilting my body at the waist just slightly to the right to see how his wound was doing. It looked like it was beginning to slowly stop bleeding and the inflammation was going away. The warrior just nodded before he took in a big breath of air through his nose. I could tell he was glad to be up and moving again. I'm sure being injured and on the ground, his fate left in the hands of a heartly Navi wasn't how he wanted to spend his day, but yet, here we were. You have no song cord. His voice hit my ears, snapping me from my thoughts. His eyes were scanning over my body and clothes like he was sizing me up, or maybe evaluating me. The mention of a song card brought a brief memory to my head of my mother's song card and how the RDA had taken it. I forced the thought away. There was no time for me to get lost in my head about Ahari again. We had my mother's, I said, gently rubbing at my right pointer finger with my thumb as I looked at my feet. I couldn't help but feel ashamed knowing I'd lost it. No, that I'd let it get taken. But the Sky People took it from me when I was young, after they killed my older sister. Mercer has it. I saw him wearing it on his wrist before he came rushing in to help me. Solek nodded at my words as he seemed to consider them, likely thinking back to where he'd come in to save me from being shot in the face by Harding. He was the man walking away from you that I saw, was he not? His hair was light, almost gray, yes? I nodded at his recalled description. Yes, that's Director John Mercer, I confirmed, trying to recall now what I remembered of him. He was the, um, Executive Vice President of Frontier Operations and an administrator of the TEP program. He oversaw a lot of our development from the time we were brought to TEP. And he's the man who killed my sister when we were children. He nodded again, silent now, before his hand fell onto my shoulder. I looked up at him, and his eyes held a warm empathy I almost shuddered when recognizing. No one had ever looked at me so kindly before, at least no one besides my family. I'm sorry for your loss, Ika'ri, he said softly, his words genuine and true, full of true sorrow. That couldn't have been easy to bear witness to. I couldn't muster any reply to that. My throat felt like it was closing up and tightening on the lump now suddenly forming in it. The memories of Ahari and the night she died came back to flood my head. They just wouldn't go away. Solek thankfully seemed to realize I was getting into my head and gave my shoulder a squeeze to snap me back into reality just before the ringing in my ears began again. Well, we must change that. Your lack of a song chord, I mean, he said, a smile forming on his lips. That made my browline raise. Was he saying I was going to have my own song chord? The curiosity in me melded with anxiety. I didn't know the first thing about making a song chord of my own. How would I even start it? No answer to that came. The loud sound of a scorpion flying over the clearing hit our ears before we saw it soar overhead in the direction of Tep. No, 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 they are too close. His hiss hit my ears before he turned back to me, his eyes blazing with new determination. Ika'ri, go! I'll meet you at the base camp. It's up the cliffs behind you, past the waterfall. You can't miss it. Stay vigilant on your way. You mustn't be seen. Solek, wait! I cried as he gingerly lifted the quiver from my back before taking his bow up from the ground and racing off away from the fueling station in the direction of the scorpion. And suddenly I was alone again. Great. Cautiously, my eyes and head turned to the direction my new acquaintance had indicated. The waterfall and cliffs I was meant to begin climbing in order to reach the resistance, where I'd hopefully be reunited with my family. There was no way left to go but up there. Well, guess it's time to get climbing.